Hello and welcome back. Today we discuss the governance and compliance parameters. The subject is governance and compliance audit. We are going to discuss those two things: governance parameters and compliance parameters. Having discussed the audit objectives and scope, after defining the audit objectives and outlining the audit scope, the next step is to determine the key governance and compliance parameters that will be the benchmark for the audit. And these parameters represent the specific criteria against which the organization's performance will be measured. In other words, they are the what and the how of the audit, and they provide a detailed framework for the fieldwork. So let's first of all begin with the key governance parameters. Governance. So we have governance parameters and compliance parameters. Now, governance parameters focus on the overall structure, processes, and culture that guide an organization. They address how decisions are made, how the board and management are held accountable, and how risks are overseen. So the key governance parameters include: number one, board and committee oversight. Board and committee oversight. Here we are discussing things like the composition of the board. Is the board's composition diverse? Is it balanced in terms of skills? Is it balanced in terms of experience? Is it balanced in terms of independence? So auditors may be called in to come and check if the board composition is appropriate. Another aspect of board and committee oversight, apart from the composition, is the structure. So when we've mentioned board composition, we also have board structure. Now, board structure, here we are looking at whether the board committees, like the audit committee, the risk committee, the compensation committee, are structured effectively with clear charters and responsibilities. When auditing, one parameter as an auditor would be to check the structure of the board and the board committees. Are there clear charters and responsibilities for committee members or for board members? Next, we have functionality. Functionality. From the word function. Does the board receive timely, accurate, and relevant information to make informed decisions? Are minutes well documented, and are decisions followed up? That's functionality. When auditing, you also check the functionality of the board and the functionality of the committees. So that's the first parameter of governance. The second parameter is what we call risk management framework. Risk management framework. Risk management framework is another parameter. Here you look at things like strategy. Strategy here, we focus on whether the board, whether the organization has well-defined and documented enterprise risk management framework. Under risk identification is checking whether risks are systematically identified, assessed, and prioritized. Then you also have monitoring and reporting. Monitoring and reporting. That's another parameter under risk management framework, where we check whether there are key risk indicators established and regularly monitored. risk reports transparently communicated to management and the board, and so on. So that's the second parameter. The third parameter is in relation to ethics, ethical leadership and culture. That's a very important governance parameter when carrying out a governance audit. Here we look at the code of conduct, the tone at the top, code of conduct, tone at the top. You check the tone at the top, the code of conduct. Is there a clear and communicated code of conduct and ethics policy? Do senior leaders demonstrate and promote ethical behavior and a strong compliance culture? So when auditing an organization, you check the ethical leadership and culture. What is the tone of ethics at the top? There's also reporting mechanisms. Under ethical leadership and culture, there has to be reporting mechanisms. Are there effective and confidential channels for employees to report ethical concerns or non-compliance, like whistleblower hotlines, and so on? That's a third parameter. Now, the fourth parameter under governance audit is internal control environment. Internal control environment. Internal control environment, here we are looking at the policies and procedures. Policies and procedures, we check, are there clear documented policies and procedures in place for key business processes? Look at things like segregation of duties. Are duties segregated? Segregation of duties. Are roles and responsibilities segregated to prevent conflicts of interest and also to reduce the risk of fraud? That has to be checked when carrying out governance audit. So these are 4 key governance parameters. Let's discuss compliance parameters. These are governance. How about compliance parameters? Now, compliance parameters are more specific and they focus on adherence to a particular set of rules from the word comply. Here, the auditor is checking whether the organization has complied to specific rules. And these rules could be legal or regulatory requirements. One is legal / regulatory requirements. That is the first parameter. And these legal or regulatory requirements could be just laws, right? Like the company law, the taxation laws, the data protection laws, and so on. So we have here laws. We may also have regulations. Certain companies could be highly regulated. Here we are referring to specific regulatory requirements which must be met. Then there is, of course, documentation. Apart from checking whether the company is complying with these laws and regulations, we check documentation. Is there evidence of compliance, such as permits, licenses, or official filings? That's how you can tell. For example, if a company is complying with taxation laws, you need to check if there are copies of returns that have been made in order to comply with the laws. Then number 2, we have internal policies. Apart from these external laws and regulations, companies may also have internal policies. Here we are referring to policy adherence. Policy adherence. Do employees and departments follow organizations' internal policies, such as IT security policies, such as financial reporting procedures, such as HR policies, and so on? There could also be policy updates. When carrying out compliance audits, you may also check if there are internal policies, if the company's internal policies are regularly reviewed and updated to reflect changes in the regulatory landscape and business operations. So that is the second parameter. The third parameter is known as contractual obligations. Now, apart from just legal and regulatory requirements, apart from internal policies, companies may have contractual obligations like vendor and third-party contracts. So you may have third-party. A company may enter into contracts with third parties, with vendors, with suppliers, with debtors, and so on. So you check if there is third-party compliance. Is the company complying with the contractual agreements? Do third-party vendors and partners comply with the terms of their contracts, particularly those related to data security and also confidentiality? There may also be service level agreements. Service level agreements. Service level agreement is the organization meeting its contractual obligations and service level agreements with the customers and partners. So that is very important. Parameter number 4 under compliance audit is reporting and disclosure. Reporting and disclosure. Here we are referring to accuracy, for example. Are financial and non-financial disclosures accurate, complete, and timely? So we are referring one thing here. Accuracy, are they accurate, timely, and timely, complete and timely? There is also the aspect of transparency. When dealing with disclosures, we are also auditing to find out if the organization communicates transparently with stakeholders, including shareholders, customers, and also the regulators. There could also be regulatory filings. Regulatory filings are all required regulatory filings submitted correctly and on time. So when auditing, the auditor has to check if the company is making filings, regulatory filings, on time. So, candidates, that's all for our today's lesson on the governance parameters and compliance parameters. We began by outlining the governance parameters. One is board, committee, and oversight. Number 2, risk management framework. There is ethical leadership and culture. Then lastly, we have internal control environment. Then we have analyzed compliance parameters, which include legal and regulatory requirements. Number 2, internal policies. Number 3, contractual obligations. And number 4, reporting and disclosure. Thank you for attending our today's lesson. In our next session, we continue with our discussion in governance and compliance audit. Bye-bye.